Welcome to my Ruby Slippers. I'm Lily from the blog Lily Strong. This is a place that is meant to be affirming and supportive and loving for all people, especially anyone who is trying to heal after abuse, misuse, and cruelty. There is just way too much cruelty in this world. Don't you agree? Before we begin, please note that this episode contains discussions of sexual abuse and non-consensual sex. It's not graphic, but these topics can still be upsetting. It could even be triggering for some listeners, so please take care of yourself. Listen in a safe place. Hit that pause button if you need to. Listen with a friend if you need support. And know that extra support is available. If you or someone you know is in crisis, you can contact the National Sexual Assault Hotline at 1-800-656-HOPE or visit RAINN, RAINN.org for confidential support. So normally this podcast has two hosts. My adult child, Silly, is usually by my side, giving his side of the story. I've gotten a few questions about Silly lately, and I would like to share that Silly was born female, but is part of the queer community and is in the process of transitioning to male. So today I refer to him as he and my son, but our stories from the past usually refer to him as she and my daughter, because part of our shared abuse was that we were both immersed in an environment that was very misogynistic. Our abuser was my ex-husband and Silly's father. He has left indelible scars on our lives through different forms of abuse, including mental, spiritual, and financial, and sexual. So today I want to talk a little about the sexual abuse. Today's episode is one of the hardest ones I've worked on, but I feel like it might be one of the most important ones because it's such a private topic, because it's filled with so much hurt and shame. And for these reasons, I asked Silly to not join us today because there are still some things I try to shield my children from, even though it is a reality. It's not something I feel comfortable talking about. Not yet. Not with my kids. This story has lived quietly inside me, as I know it has with many other people. It has filled me with shame, guilt, and ultimately the resignation that sexual abuse can occur in marriage. I used to shy away from strong words. When my ex-husband's betrayals started coming to life, I couldn't even say betrayal because I was talking about my partner, my other half, someone I trusted implicitly, somebody I thought I was in love with. But it turns out I really didn't know him at all. Since then, I have learned more and more about the strength of using proper words to label especially the intangible things like feelings and emotions. If I say I'm sad, you'll understand what I mean. But if I say I'm devastated, that word has so much more depth. It's more than just sad. It's describing a much bigger wound. If I say I'm confused, you would understand. But if I say I was utterly baffled, it just, moves it up a notch. Instead of saying I was mad, I would say I'm furious. And you would all understand the difference that I'm trying to convey. There's just a power in using accurate language. That being said, abuse is not a word that should be thrown around lightly. Abuse is not when someone is kind of mean to you. Disagreements and arguments are not an example of abuse. People are allowed to have different opinions and speak their mind. That is not abuse. Abuse crosses a line. And just a couple years ago in counseling, I finally said out loud for the first time, I was abused. My therapist stopped right there and she just said, I'm so proud of you for saying you were abused. This is a big moment. Let's pause and honor that. Because naming it, saying the word abused, although terrifying, was also liberating. It was like a strength transfusion, leeching the strength away from my abuser and giving it to me. Honestly, I usually dance around that term. I try to use less harmful sounding words like toxic environment or unhappy place. This is because if you've heard any of my other podcasts, I'm a pretty upbeat person. I'm dubbed the reluctant optimist. I like to paint a happier picture. I'm kind of like a Disney character. And sometimes I just want to take the sting out of the reality of events, but no amount of coins thrown into the wishing well is going to change the meaning of the word abuse. And just because I like you guys, I looked up the meaning of abuse. Let me see. Here, pull it up. Abuse it's a verb and a noun. And for the verb, it means use something to bad effect or for a bad purpose, misuse. Or it also means treat a person or an animal with cruelty or violence, especially regularly or repeatedly. And a noun is pretty much the exact same thing, but in noun form. The improper use of something and cruel and violent treatment of a person or animal. So it was something that I was finally able to say, I was abused. And it was worthy of celebration by my therapist and me. It took time before I could add the next part to that sentence and say, I was sexually abused. That is so hard. It's still hard to hear me say it out loud. And to be honest with you, I still struggle to say the word rape. It just catches in my throat. Not because it isn't true, but because it feels like such a heavy, heavy word, especially when I'm applying it to my own life. But naming what happened is powerful. It puts responsibility where it belongs. It burns off some of the fog of confusion. And it really has been helping me find my way back to myself. So that's what I'm going to do today. We're going to talk about sexual abuse in marriage. Maybe not all that bravely, certainly not explicitly, but I'm trying to name it because then it can't hide in the shadows. So let's talk about consent, imbalance of power, truth about sexual abuse. And we're going to name it, not to stay stuck in the pain, but to walk through it toward freedom. So let's start here. Being married to somebody doesn't mean they own your body. Nope, not at all. There's no invisible ink on a marriage license that erases your agency. There is no I do that means you don't have control over your body. Consent. This is important, guys. Consent is not a one-time transaction. It is ongoing. It is mutual. And it is revocable. That means it is a continuous thing that needs to be given. And you can take it away anytime you want. Even if you're married. Even if you've been having sex before, even if you're lying in the same bed together. Consent must be given. Okay, here's something I found to be really interesting. When I was getting ready for this, I looked this up. Marital rape wasn't criminalized in all 50 U.S. states until 1993. Literally, it wasn't a crime in every state. 1993, that wasn't that long ago. Okay, I got married in 1991. That means I grew up and spent my first 2 years married with the unspoken belief that once you're married, your body is no longer yours. And that belief is just wrong. And it's dangerous. Okay, I have something to admit. I am a total nerd when it comes to true crime. I love documentaries, History Channel, and even reality shows. I am endlessly fascinated by the psychology of other people. I just finished watching the one about the lady who claimed to have cancer and profited off that online. I don't know. I guess I'm too much of a black and white person. I think good is good and evil is evil. So I don't understand how a person can be so selfish, so narcissistic, to think that was a good idea, that it wouldn't hurt anybody else, and that they wouldn't get caught. Come on, seriously? I don't know. All I do know is that when I boil all these psychological things down, everything is driven by power. And most abuse is caused by an imbalance of power. In most heterosexual relationships, there's already a natural imbalance of power, just because men are usually bigger, stronger, louder. They just dominate more. And they don't have to be abusive to wield power. They just have to exist in our society that has always handed it to them. And sex, biologically, is invasive for women. It happens to our bodies in a different way. It is more aggressive. We are more vulnerable. So sometimes we don't want to have sex, right? And yet so many women are taught that saying no is cold and selfish or unloving, that a good wife should be ready and willing to meet her husband's needs no matter what hers are. This idea doesn't just create unhealthy marriages. It creates conditions where, okay, marital rape, I said it, can hide in plain sight. Because when one person is expected to give and the other expects to take, well, that's an imbalance of power. So I'm going to share a couple personal stories, and to be honest, this is still very raw. It's a very unhealed part of my peregrination that I'm not totally ready to be completely transparent with, but I want to at least start because it is a topic that's hushed up and quieted, and that's only allowing more people to be abused. As I just said, I love watching true crime shows and documentaries, and I also like reality shows because they also give a lot of insight to people's psychology. And there's so many times when I am watching a dating game or just a silly reality show, and I just want to grab a person and shake them and say, wake up! You are with an abusive person. This is wrong. So, I don't want this to be hushed up anymore. I'm hoping by shining a spotlight on the problem, by naming the behavior, maybe we can help other people. Not long into my marriage, my husband gave me a nickname that was actually kind of mean. He began calling me false advertising. He said he thought he was getting more than he got. that I was sexy and desirable, but my sex drive didn't match not just his sex drive, but what he expected it to be. He said it like a joke, but it wasn't funny. It was calculated. It was a calculated way to shame me, to pressure me, and to make me feel like I had misled him simply by being me. That phrase, false advertising. It might sound harmless to some, but come on, let's call it what it really is. Damaging and abusive. Because it is exploitative. It reduces me to a product, a thing, something he believed he had purchased, and he felt entitled to more. Calling someone false advertising isn't jokey or loving. That kind of language isn't about compatibility or misunderstanding. It's control. It is all about framing a woman's body and sexuality as a commodity that's supposed to meet someone else's standards, or that it can be punished with guilt and mockery and emotional withdrawal. And his big power grab didn't stop at words, and I have to laugh at my little pun there because I used the word grab. He often grabbed my body without warning and without care. And I don't mean he would grab me and hug me. I mean he'd reach out and grab my breast or a different part. And it was often roughly and quite often cruelly. And then he'd laugh and say, "Can you believe people say your body is mine?" He would say that almost as if designed to be misleading. So if I say, "What do you mean? Are you crazy?" Then he'd say, "Well, I didn't say that. Other people think that." It's so hard trying to keep up with a person who's manipulative all the time. So I am not at all proud of this, but I learned how to shrink. I tried to be small and invisible. I tried to not call attention to myself. I learned to cover up before leaving the bathroom. I learned to dry myself super fast after my shower because I didn't want to spend any amount of time bent over. I learned that naked didn't mean safe, not even in my own home. I would get grabbed, touched, and thrust against without consent, and certainly not my desire, because sometimes it would hurt, and I didn't enjoy that. And, to be clear, I had voiced that. But I shrunk. And that's what living with abuse does. It trains you to accept being on guard constantly. I have been away from my abuser for 3.5 years now, and I still have to remind myself I can go slow when I'm drying off from the shower because I don't have anybody here doing that. I can take a minute and be naked and not have to worry about that. It's very much a learned behavior that I am trying to overcome. So what is worse than being small is that from the outside nothing seemed wrong. There were no bruises, no shouting matches in the parking lots. There wasn't fighting. There wasn't public belittling. Just the steady erosion of my dignity. The loss of ownership over my own body. That's what made what came next so difficult to name. Once my husband's lies and betrayals began surfacing, I was confused. Or you could say I was utterly baffled, right? Sorry, probably shouldn't be laughing. But once this all started happening, I made it clear to my husband that I didn't want to have sex anymore. I said it calmly, directly. I explained that things between us were broken and I didn't feel safe emotionally or physically. I set a boundary. He heard it. He even acknowledged it. And yet, I woke up in the middle of the night to find him having sex with me actively. I was disoriented from sleep. I was exhausted from work, from mothering, from life, from all the crap he was putting me through. My defenses were down. And I woke up to him having sex with my body. I hadn't said no right then, and I wasn't screaming or fighting, but I wasn't awake, and I hadn't said yes. I stopped him and asked, "What are you doing?" And this is what he said. He said, "You were moaning in your sleep." As if that somehow counted as permission, as if that somehow made it okay, as if it were all my fault. Right out of the abuser's playbook, right? I mean, he was trying to play the hero because obviously I must have had a sexual need and he was just fulfilling that. But no, he wasn't a hero. He crossed the boundary. He didn't listen to me. This wasn't confusion or a misunderstanding. It was a choice. He made a conscious choice to override my body and ignore my words and then take advantage of me. But here's the truth. Consent is never implied. Consent is never permanent, and consent is never owed. I do not have to give my consent to him because he's my husband. Consent should not be implied just because we're married. And it's not permanent. I can take it back anytime I want. I had not given consent. Quite the opposite. And he crossed that boundary. It's hard remembering how I felt. I felt used, disrespected, dirty. I was confused. But I wasn't just confused, I was utterly baffled. I was mad, but I was also furious. And I wasn't just sad, I was devastated. And still, I didn't call it rape because I didn't know I could. I have to admit, waking up with him being sexual was a pretty common thing. It was pretty interesting that during one of our earlier podcasts, Lilly shared with me that interruption of sleep and deprivation of sleep are tools of abuse. And I see now that it was certainly a tool he favored. But after I clearly said no, it crossed into marital rape. 1 week later, it happened again. It happened twice after I had taken away consent. Like it just didn't matter. Abuse doesn't always come with bruises. Sometimes it comes with guilt, or religious language, or silence. I was made to feel like intimacy was my duty, like saying no would make me a bad wife, or unloving, or frigid, or, oh God, worse, I would be the catalyst to cause him to go cheat on me, and it would be my fault. And even though I felt hurt and taken advantage of, and even though my soul screamed, "This isn't okay," I was too ashamed to speak it out loud. But now I'm saying it because someone listening might need the permission I didn't have. So let me give it to you clearly. If you did not give consent, it wasn't sex, it was assault. Even if you are married, even if you were silent, even if he gives you some weak-ass apology, if you denied consent, it is abuse. Name it. If this story has stirred something in you, whether it's a memory or a question or just a deep sigh, I want you to know you're not crazy, you're not alone, and you are not to blame. I used to be afraid of words like abuse and rape, but now I know those words weren't accusations, they were my truth. It took a lot of counseling, and it took probably way too much time. And it took my amazing therapist to gently say, "Hey, let's name this together. You don't have to get it all perfect." I certainly don't. I'm a mess. My healing peregrination is all over the map, but I'm trying to keep moving forward little by little. You don't have to say everything today, but if you're ready to start naming it, even just to yourself, even whispered quietly, that is brave. That is healing. You are allowed to own your story without shame. In my story, my husband mistakenly thought I was his possession, and he decided to have sex with me even after I said no. That is considered marital rape. And I refuse to be ashamed for his abuse anymore. It wasn't my fault. It's his. Join me by placing the blame on the guilty person from now on. And when you do, remember the encouragement my therapist gave me. Let's pause and honor this moment, because even acknowledging the harm is a victory. Okay, this has been really hard for me. But if I can just help just one person become aware of their own situation, it's worth it. It really is. So, until I talk to y'all later, Just remember that, like Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, there's no place like home. And your home is where your body is respected, your voice is heard, and your truth is safe. Always.